hit got it, right? Okay. Testing, can you guys hear me? Yes? I will. Hi, Susan. We have to get together. We have to get together at some point. Before Christmas, we should do that. Yes. Forget I'm on the speaker. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm always so glad to come in here and I see so many faces that are dear to me. So it's really nice to see my friends still here. And I'm afraid I haven't been around as much. I always intend to. And life has been crazy. I don't know if it has been for anyone else. Maybe I'm the only one who's like that, but anyway. I always, before I start a talk, I always think of, in our Zen group, we say a gatha before we talk, and basically it says, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's true meaning. And I always feel like when I'm going to talk, I just hope that something flows through me, that I can get out of my own way and something will flow through me and that you will get something out of it. So I hope that that's true. A monk, Seizei, eagerly asked Master Sozan, I am solitary and poor. I beg you, Master, please help me to become prosperous. Sozan said, Venerable Seizei. Seizei said, yes, Master. Sozan said, you have already drunk 3 cups of the fine Hakka wine, and still you say that you have not yet moistened your lips. So this is case 10 from the Mumonkan, and the Mumonkan is called the Gateless Gate, or sometimes the Gateless Barrier. And Mumon was also known as Wu Men, a Chinese teacher of the 13th century, who collected these stories. The stories had been around before, but he collected these stories and he wrote commentaries on them. And then, of course, there's new translations, and they wrote commentaries on his commentaries. So they're kind of interesting to read. Sozan, the teacher in this story, is also known as sorry, I have to pronounce it right, Shaoshan, and he was the student of Dongshan, and together, Dongshan and Shaozan formed the Shaodong school, which is the Soto school of Zen that came out of China. So this teacher, Shaoshan, or Sozan in Japanese, was a very important and very well-known teacher in the 9th century in China. The Seizei, the person asking the question, we don't know much about, but Seizei, most likely, from information we have, was the head monk or the leader of all Sozan's disciples. So these two people are not, obviously the teacher is accomplished, but the person asking the question is also accomplished. So he's not asking a question from a position of complete ignorance or lack of understanding. So Seizei, when he asks about being solitary and poor, he's not talking about solitary as lonely or disconnected. He's talking about solitary in the sense that everything we sense and everything we experience is a function of this being, this body, that it all comes through the filter of this existence, each of us independently, And so in that sense, this being, this one body of mind is the whole universe. And the whole universe, everything we know about the universe comes through this same single filter. And so when he's talking about being solitary, he's talking about, it's not aloneness, maybe it's oneness in the sense of one is the whole universe, the whole world. So when we pay attention, we cannot find where we and the other or outside of us ends. I've talked about this before, but I went through a period of a number of months where every time the bell would ring at the end of meditation, I'd try to catch it and find out where it started. Like where did it start? Where did I end and where did it start? Or where did it become that thing outside of me? I could never find it. And that's the point, obviously. I just couldn't find it. So that everything that we experience is really, it's really us. This world, this universe is me. It's I. It's this I. So everything is us. Everything is this body mind. This is what Buddha meant when he said, above the heavens, below the earth, I alone am the world honored one. Now, he said this when he was born, so we have to think about this a little bit. He took, 5 steps or something like that, and then supposedly said this. And when I first heard this, I thought, well, that's pretty highfalutin, to say I alone am the world honored one. And I dismissed it as, well, people try to exalt their religion, and people wrote this centuries later and all that sort of thing. But through practice and study, and I realized that it's really saying exactly what I'm talking about, that he was saying, the whole universe is me. I am the whole universe. And we also hear that he said when he saw the morning star, and his enlightenment story, that he said that I and the whole world enlighten with me. I'm paraphrasing. But that everyone becomes enlightened when I become enlightened. So this is talking about that, in a way it's solitary, but it's a solitary that includes everything and everyone, with no separation at all. So every one of us is the only one in the entire universe, and we are one with the entire universe. In that sense, we are solitary. In our essential nature, we are what Uchiyama Roshi calls big mind, or self with a capital S. And I know we talk a lot about no self, but in Zen they talk a lot about self with a capital S, which is this wide-ranging self that includes everything. So Uchiyama Roshi, some of you may know him from Opening the Hand of Faith? Opening Hand of Thought. Some of you may have read that book. Anyway, he's a pretty well-known teacher. But he says, the truth self has nothing to do with others. It is a self that lives totally within itself. The world as experienced is the world which the self alone, you alone, can experience. None of your personal experiences can ever be the same as anyone else's. More so, then, is your way of thinking bound to be different from everyone else's. When you are born, your world is born with you. And when you die, so dies your entire world. Your true self includes the entire world you live in. Regardless of where you might find yourself, there is only the self, which is always the self, hence the phrase, I alone am the world honored one. Of course, he's referring to Buddha's phrase. So this is a solitary of Seizei. This is the self of our essential nature, or we might say our Buddha nature. This is an aloneness which includes the whole universe and everything we sense or think. This aloneness is really oneness, the oneness of just this, just as things are. This is the whole universe that is myself right here. This I is the whole universe. The whole universe is I. There is nothing outside of me. Everywhere I turn, Deborah, Deborah, Deborah. I try to get away from it, but there it is. Okay. So when Seizei talks about being poor, he's not talking about being poor in the sense of worldly possessions. He's talking about the poverty of our essential nature. Mumonkan, who collected these stories in his commentary, says, he helps us out a lot to understanding this. So he says, every one of us is extremely poor, for in our essential nature, there is nothing. There is neither subject nor object. There is nothing to be seen, to be touched, to be handled. It has no form, no color, no weight, no place to stay. In other words, our essential nature is totally void. When I was preparing this talk, I thought, well, this is a cheerful subject for Christmas, don't you think? Actually, it's a very cheerful subject because it includes everything, but solitary and poor. So this is the emptiness of our essential nature, and this is the formlessness of our original mind before sensations and conceptions. This is the no-self of our Buddha nature. In Zen practice, we cultivate a sort of poverty of the mind. I love that phrase. We let go of all our desires, concepts, beliefs, and even the sense of being an individual self. We recognize the emptiness of all things, the poverty of all conceptions. And I want to read you a quote from Domyo Burke, who is the teacher at Brightway Zen in Portland. She says, actually, I'm saying she, and I thought it was a she. No, it is a she. It is a she. I'm sorry, it is a she. I saw a picture and it was a guy, and then it was the wrong picture. I'm sorry, it is a she. She is a she. We realize, after some practice and study, that we are empty of any inherently existing, enduring, independent self-nature. Instead, we are a flow of being through time, shaped by countless causes and conditions. We are nowhere to be found. This is the Zen teaching of emptiness or no self. So when Seizei says he is solitary and poor, he is recognizing this aloneness of his experience and the poverty of nothing that can be held on to. All things are empty of an inherent, enduring nature. So Seizei, has some knowledge, some insight, some understanding, and he's challenging his teacher in some way. So, let me say again, Seizei asked Master Sozan, I am solitary and poor. I beg you, Master, please help me to become prosperous. Sozan said, Venerable Seizei. Yes, Master, replied Seizei. Sozan said, you have already drunk 3 cups of fine Hakka wine, and still you say that you have not yet moistened your lips. So Hakka wine was a family-made wine in China that was considered the finest wine in all of China. So it's really a sensuous treasure of China, of their heritage. So he's saying, that you've already had this treasure. You already have this treasure, and yet you're saying you have nothing. Mumonkan says in his commentary, this void, this no self, has limitless treasures. It can see, it can hear, it can cry, it can laugh, run, and eat. In a word, it's limitless. Emptiness and timelessness are characteristics of our essential nature. So Sozan is telling Seizei, yes, though your absolute nature is solitary and poor, your phenomenal nature is full of riches. It's full of riches. And both are true. When we open to the awareness that we are solitary and poor, that we alone are the whole universe. The universe is we alone, and that there is nothing to hold on to, nothing to have, and nothing has a discrete, permanent existence. Then the universe and everything in it becomes ourselves and becomes one wondrous jewel. An incredible jewel, which includes the finest Hakka wine, includes my friends in the Sangha, includes that beautiful sunset tonight. I don't know if anybody saw that on the way in. Includes all of that. So truly, we cannot find where we and the other or outside begins. All things are manifest in our bodies and our minds. All things are manifestations of our bodies and our minds. Buddhist literature talks about the diamond net of Indra, a net in which every intersection contains a jewel, and every jewel reflects every other jewel. When one jewel is moved, the whole net moves. When the net is lifted up, every jewel in the net is lifted up. When one jewel is enlightened, the whole net is enlightened, and every jewel along with it. John Dido Laurie says, I am the diamond net of Indra. In the vast diamond net of Indra, each thing contains everything, and each thing is separate and distinct from everything else. So this is the self that we encounter in meditation, whether we are aware of it or not. You know, that this is the self. When we drop our thoughts and they begin to fade away, we drop our conceptions and we just sit. Thoughts do arise and they fade. Sounds appear and they disappear. Sensations occur and they pass away. And suddenly our mind is not the thoughts that we have, but it's all of this. It's everything. It's the air on my hand, the coolness. You know? It's everything. So we become larger, something vast and unlimited. And our world is filled with treasure, vast, unlimited, continuously arising treasure. We are the forms and sensations we perceive, whether they are what we consider inside or what we consider outside. The forms and sensations are us, and there is no separation in any way. So although what we perceive may be diluted in a very basic level, at a very basic level, we are also the vastness of the universe. So I always love that for me, you know, the fact that I can be diluted and also enlightened at the same time. It's very saving grace as far as I'm concerned. It's wonderful. So we are definitely prosperous and embody every treasure this life has to offer. When we cease to occupy our ordinary mind and no longer define a separate, discrete self, there is no longer a separation. This body, this mind, this world, all become one. This is the mind, the vast unlimited mind of our essential nature. And everything we encounter becomes treasure. Mumonkan again tells us that what Sozan is saying to Seizei is, you are perfect just like that. Sounds like Suzuki Roshi, right? We've all heard him say, you are perfect just like that. You are using your essential nature fully. Is there any defect in it? No, you have everything from the very beginning. What more do you want? You know, I think I'm sorry, I won't be able to quote it exactly, but in the dedication we do at the beginning where we say a joy that pervades all suffering, or I forget exactly what the word, anybody remember? You know it, no? Yeah, you're not gonna come off, I can't do it, I thought I had it in my head, but transcends, so this is that joy. You know, this is that joy that regardless of what comes up in our lives, because there's good things we consider good, things we consider bad, but when we practice, we've come in touch with something else, which is this larger mind, which includes all that, you know, that it's a joy that includes all that. So our task, if there is one, is to not only to realize our essential aloneness or oneness and the emptiness of all things, that we might call, in Zen they call it dropping body and mind, but also to recognize the incredible richness and freedom that is inherent in being one with all things and this universe, which is our very self. To have true understanding, we must know both, and we must be able to freely move from one to the other. You know, I've been doing koan study, and of course this is a koan, but one of the points of koan study is to, you know, some koans ask you to talk from the absolute or the big mind, and some ask you to talk from the phenomenal, ordinary life. And someone told me, well, that's the point of koan study, is to get you so you can move back and forth between them, And I think that a lot of our practice is like that. That we want to, we sit and meditate, and we get insight, and we carry that insight. But the point is to carry it back into our lives. Is to be able to have both. To have both and to understand both. In practice, we aspire to freely function in both the knowledge of our essential nature and the awareness of our phenomenal nature, to respond to each and everything that occurs in our lives with the fullness that comes from that understanding. We must step forward as the universe calls us and say, as does Seizei, yes, Master, yes, I am here. Whether the universe calls with the great joy of a newborn child, or a beautiful sunset, or the deep sadness of a lost loved one, or some kind of loss of social status, or anything that we may consider negative, whether it calls in any of those ways, whether we consider them good or bad, when the universe calls, we answer, we walk forward again, and we carry with us this knowledge that we have. Gao Gu, who is a Chan Buddhist teacher from Tallahassee. I had just discovered this guy, and he's great. It's really wonderful. So Chan, you don't hear a lot of Chan in the United States, but some of his stuff is wonderful. He has a couple books out. I haven't gotten them, but I'm going to try to get them. He says, emptiness is everything right now. It is the dynamic flow of our connectedness to everything. It is our natural ability to respond from moment to moment. It is fullness, connectedness, and relationships. It is the free response to the world without being obstructed, without injecting a self into all situations, in everything that needs to be done. And I'm going to just end with a poem, and this is a poem by a guy named Seizei, a famous Zen teacher. He says, what I call alone is to forget what I call alone and not alone, and to forget the one who forgets. This is truly to be alone. So I always think, I have all these pages, and I always think this is way too long a talk, and then I get finished and I look up there and we have lots of time. So I hope you guys will have something to say about this. Questions? And please remind me to keep an eye on the people in Zoom, because I forget.
Since we do have time, could you just reiterate the point that you made right before you read that last poem?
You want me to say that again from Gao?
Yes,
Gao Gu?
I didn't grasp it.
Yeah, Gao Gu. Yeah, it's a great name. That's the universe calling us, you guys. Or calling Gao Gu, maybe. Okay. Emptiness is everything right now. It is the dynamic flow of our connectedness to everything. It is our natural ability to respond from moment to moment. It is fullness, connectedness, and relationships. It is the free response to the world without being obstructed, without injecting a self into all situations, in everything that needs to be done. And I just want to say about that that part of the koan that I didn't really talk about, which is a very important part of the koan, which is simply when he says, Venerable Seizei, and Seizei, without thinking, says, yes, Master. And, I read a lot of different interpretations about this particular story, but a lot of people talk about that I want to say gut reaction, just gut response, but it's just coming forward without getting in your own way, just responding to what the universe asks you. Yeah. Yes.
Well, you know, the term emptiness is so ephemeral, you know, it's so ineffable.
It is
You know,
ineffable.
it's difficult to talk about, really, and there are different senses of it, and sometimes we can get a feeling of, wow, that's terrible, emptiness, you know, nothing, you know, void, you know, that's.
Yeah.
But of course, I really like that you make a distinction between the koans and having people talk on the phenomenal level versus the more absolute level. And then what I really loved about emptiness, it almost sounded like, this is just my impression, tell me if you think it makes sense, that if we try to grasp at ourselves as being separate, independently, inherently existent, that's nothing, that's the void. But if we see ourselves as nothing, or see ourselves as shunyata, is that the right word, or suchness, in the sense of being in this flow of interconnectedness, then that's the emptiness, that's the fullness. I don't know, that's just kind of what it just came to me as I was listening to you.
Yeah. And I think, you know, part of it, I think that when you really let go of all that and are open to the non-existence in some sense of in any constant what's the wording, some consistent self or some consistent reality to things and experiences. And when you let go of that, it's like all of a sudden everything, you are everything, you're connected to everything. So that's why I like, instead of a aloneness or solitariness, is oneness in the sense of it's still one, but it's all of it, you know? But the other point of this, you know, the koan is saying that, you know, that you can't just rest in that place of maybe blissing, you know, blissing out, of saying, you know, this is there, you know, things are non-existent, the self is non-existent, I'm connected to all things. You have to come back into the world. We live in a phenomenal existence. And that's what we live in.
Thank you, Deborah. I love the Indra's net, because I think that helps to hold that awareness of the self totally connected and a part of the whole. I'm wondering, I keep stumbling though over the end of the koan. He says here, you know, here you've had 3 glasses of wine. And what I understand him to be saying, you've had 3 glasses of wine and yet you still can't touch into your Buddha nature. Why? I would want him to be clear-headed, not having had wine. And, you know, so I that's one, you know, if he had said, you've just eaten a mango and the juice is still on your lips, and yet, you know, then I could accept it somehow. I'm pushing against that part of it.
We could easily change it to tea, finest green tea or something.
Right,
Matcha.
that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe the wine.
What?
Maybe the wine is representative of, it's representing the Dharma. I mean, it's the finest, it's the best, it's the, there's nothing like it, you know, so maybe it's more metaphorical. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I think he's like almost saying, come back, come back. Here, we're sitting here, drink, you know, I mean, I don't think they were actually drinking wine, maybe they were, you know, but he's saying, here, this body, you know, come back. There's all these treasures, you know. I mean, you don't just have, or maybe coming back is the wrong terminology, but, you know, it's like both, you know. You know, I will say there's one, it was interesting to me on this story, because this story just really caught me and I really liked it. But then I did a lot of studying, and there's like two strains of interpretation on this. And one interpretation is this guy is kind of in the dark night of the soul. Like he's, you know, he's let go of all this stuff and he doesn't know now, you know, it's like, okay, I've had all these realizations, you know. And he's saying that the other interpretation is simply that they're both, he's kind of testing his teacher and testing his teacher's knowledge in some way, you know, and they're testing each other in a way. So they're both, you know, and I think that's one of the reasons these stories persist is they have a lot of meat to them, you know, a lot of ways that you can look at them. And now, you know, the way I'm talking about koans here is, you know, actually looking at some of the symbols and the meanings and the history and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of times if you work on a koan, what comes up for you is just as valid as maybe what the meaning is to somebody else, you know? So koans are used in a lot of different ways, or not a lot of different ways, but a couple of main ways. And so coming up, you know, sometimes what it means to you is valid, you know. In fact, someone told me as long as you can convince the person that you're presenting to, whatever is okay, you know, as long as you're convinced.
It's Sharon.
Yes.
I had heard the 3 cups of wine as the 3 jewels as well.
Oh.
Could you review that little bit about when you were talking about the light?
The light?
Yeah.
Can you say more? Because I don't know which part.
I don't know. I caught, you know, it's kind of like when you were talking.
Oh, I know. I think, let me see. I think it's Mumonkan again. Was I quoting?
Maybe. When you were talking about it, I caught this glimpse of an insight, and I'm trying to get it back.
Oh, you're trying to get it back?
I'm grasping after my insight.
Insights have no permanent existence either, so I'm afraid you have to let it go. I don't know if there was something about light. I don't even remember something about light. I could let you look at my notes. See if you could find it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, what flashed in my mind at the time was a quote from Jesus saying, "I am the light of the world," and going, "Oh, that's what he meant."
Yeah. Yes.
Whatever you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I just was reading an article where they were using the term ineffable, and they were talking about, you know, how in Buddhism is the one religion that kind of has an ineffable that actually has no form, you know, whereas other religions give it some form in some way. Anybody online? Oh, sorry. Yeah, is there anybody online? Thank you. Anybody? No, they're all quiet tonight. Oh, Rosemary has her hand. Oh, okay, I see it. There you go. Please, Rosemary.
Hi there.
Hi.
As long as we're talking about different traditions, what the koan reminded me of was a story that James Baraz told about being in India and with his teacher that I think was probably Meninjaji, but I don't know. And he comes to the teacher and he says, I'm doing okay, but I just need grace. And Meninjaji says, grace? Grace, you're knee deep in grace and you don't even know it.
Yeah, yeah, that's the Hakka wine. Yeah, very similar. Yeah. Oh,
Over here, somebody?
there's someone over there who wanted to say something.
I was comforted by the fact that you're saying that we can have delusion and enlightenment at the same time.
Yeah.
It's kind of, we can have everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
They kind of went together for me.
Well, this is my own conclusion, but I'm afraid we never get rid of delusion. And, I think it's the nature of our mind to be deluded. It's, the truth is that the way we function in the world is by grouping things, categorizing things. I mean, if we had to think about everything in the world before we moved or did anything, our brains couldn't handle it. So we generalize and categorize, and that's a kind of delusion, And I also think, we sometimes talk about seeing through that delusion and seeing truth. I don't know if that's possible. I think we have a sense of truth, but our brains we're a animal, we're an animal that has certain functions, and our brain is one of those organs, and our brain functions in a particular way. So in terms of understanding it, we probably can't, but I think we can sense it or something. I mean, and this is just me. This is not Buddha Dharma talking, This is.
It's that dual reality of
That's what?
the dual reality.
Yeah.
That our survival depends on our phenomenologic
It
mind.
depends completely on it.
And yet we can hopefully touch and see the absolute.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing I read recently was the fact that the absolute keeps coming up makes this person think that it actually exists. And I think, it's like, it's not just a total delusion. It comes up everywhere, like you're saying, in other religions and everything. So, and if it is a delusion, it's a really nice delusion anyway.
I would respond absolutely to that.
Well, I wanted to get back to that Hakka wine reference, and
I should have brought a glass.
did you bring
to
any? Yeah. You hear stories about someone living in a house and thinking they're impoverished, but there are jewels buried beneath the house, right? I mean, that's a common kind of reference. And I was thinking about, he said, you say you have nothing, and yet you just drank the finest wine. You have the finest treasure that there is, and yet you say you have nothing. And so I was thinking, Buddhist kind of philosophy or thought, if you will, is very slippery. If you try to read like some of the sutras, there it's like you have like many words and no nouns, and it's like you have to juggle a lot of balls at once, and it's just very slippery, I think. And so, but I think it's that way. Well, I mean, I don't know if I could say that, but I mean, it's paradoxical. Like the response, I'm poor, can you help me be prosperous? Well, you have the finest treasure. It's paradoxical, and a paradox, some things are only seeming paradoxes, because in a paradox, both things can't be true at the same time. But if it's this kind of paradox, I guess maybe usually the richest paradoxes can be both true, because each is true on a different level. And so you are very rich, you have this treasure, is true on this absolute level, but it's also true on the phenomenal level, because, well, I don't know if he literally was drinking wine. Is he literally drinking wine? We don't know.
We don't know.
But and of course it's metaphorical, as someone said, and so it's metaphorical and paradoxical, and so this, it's like a two-step, the dance. You've got to switch feet. you're going to be on the absolute, you're going to be on the phenomenal, you got to keep moving, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
I think, if like for them at that time, Haka wine was a symbol of something, So, I could say, did you have dinner tonight? And are you warm? Well, maybe you're not, maybe you're cold right now. Or are you dressed warmly, And yet you say you're poor, You could say something like that. Anyone else? Anyone else on Zoom?
And of course, we know Jesus was very poor too. I'm going to stop talking, but just because of the Jesus
another
reference.
thing, they say a lot of times is that, in fact, this was something I read when I was looking at this koan, said that poverty is a much better state of mind for practice than wealth, that wealth gets in the way, and so suffering is also, a very good state of mind for practice, as we all know. How many times are we just cruising and then something happens and we go, man, I'm really going to practice now. I'm really going to try to understand this, Anyway, someone else, yes.
I think this is probably my lack of experience speaking, but ding ding. Yep.
Yeah.
I think this is probably my lack of experience speaking, but I'm hearing this phenomenological absolute level, and it seems like there's hey, absolute is better or preferred, and I'm trying to resolve that with the middle path teaching of I'm hearing an A or B, and I'm trying to understand how it can be an A and B.
Mm. Yeah, I don't think the absolute is preferred. I think, though, that the problem is we are often caught in our phenomenological existence and don't pay attention to the absolute, to the wider. We lose touch with it much more easily. And as far as both are true, is that what you were saying? There's the contradiction of both that can be true? That
I don't know.
Well, that's a good place to be. And I would say that, you can only answer that for yourself. And that's what practice is about. It's not about, it's about your own experience, and that, I can get up here and talk. I used to feel like, I used to teach art, okay? So I taught art history and I taught painting. And I remember I used to get up there, and when I had painting teachers, they never gave demos, but I would give demos and show them how to paint this thing, and then I heard from somebody said that somebody in the class complained that I didn't give enough demos, and that person said, she just finished an hour of showing you how to do this. Well, it doesn't, my teaching, showing somebody how to paint an apple or whatever, or a mountain, is not going to teach you how to paint an apple or a mountain. You could use that information and go and experience it, and then you will know how to paint an apple or a mountain, by the struggle and the trial and error and all that stuff. And that's the same with practice. So these are, we're pointing at something with words that is not in words. And so I would say, don't worry about if it doesn't make sense. If I always felt when I first started practicing that I would hear things, Dogen, everybody here knows I love Dogen. So I'd hear things of Dogen, and I didn't understand really what he meant at all, but I felt some truth to it. I felt something from it. And so I would pay attention to that, and not worry too much about, do I understand it all? Because the understanding is this, and this gets in our way a lot. Yeah. Anybody else? I hope I answered your question somewhat. I hope I did.
Deborah, on Zoom.
Yes, David, please go ahead.
thank you for your Dharma talk. And I'm aware that this is the Rohatsu time of season.
Yes,
December 8th is the celebration of Buddha's enlightenment,
yes,
which has always been a key hook for me for Buddhism. Prince Siddhartha actually did this stuff. That's a very important
yeah,
concept for me.
yes,
Not that I could do it, and yet the world is full of war and bad things that I won't say, fill in the blank. But it's wonderful that here we are studying a koan with you in Avila Beach, doing what we can to
yes,
do what he did.
yes,
It's quite marvelous for this
yes,
time
it
of year.
is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that too. That's really wonderful. Thank you. Somebody else? Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying just before about experiencing it for yourself. I think for myself, that is exactly what drew me to Buddhism. I remember reading early on that the Buddha said, don't believe what I'm telling you. Find out for yourself. It was so unlike what I grew up with, where this is the dogma, you have to believe it or else. So that's a reward in itself that we can experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yeah. And I think, some of the things that I was talking about tonight, I think are things that in a way they're hard for us to wrap ourselves around. But I think and certainly I don't have like full understanding or insight or whatever. But it speaks to something in me that says it's true, and maybe an aspiration, if nothing else. And I think that's part of what we're trying. We just have an aspiration to live more fully and more thoroughly human, I think in some way. And that means all of it, not just the physical, not just the phenomenal, but everything. Yeah. Anybody else? I think we're getting close here. Anybody on Zoom? I think we're got everybody on Zoom. Well, we have a few more minutes, but I think if that's it, we'll go ahead and stop and go enjoy the riches of the phenomenal life. That's what the holidays have become about, right? The physical. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Zoom hosts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of thought, well, maybe we're talking about stuff that's too out there. But this is just what we need. Yeah.